Hey everybody, welcome back to the Process Podcast. I am your host, Sarah Jane. Thanks for showing up in my corner of the world where we talk about the daily process of life, the hustle and bustle, the details, and what kind of information we need to help us navigate as we move forward on a day-to-day basis. So I wanted to touch today on, obviously, I have a hyper focus on what's happening in the world, but from a more expansive perspective. After some of the things that I've learned, I now see things from a completely different perspective. And I like to share that with other people because this perspective supports my survival. We've heard time and time again, oh my gosh, the world is just terrible, it's falling apart, or the infamous one, the world's going to hell in a handbasket, right? I'm here to offer up a different perspective. It's going to be way outside of the box. I'm way outside of the box, but I think people are beginning to realize that that's where you're going to find happiness, right? So I was shown this post earlier this week, and I wanted to share with everybody because I thought this was a great post to pinpoint what I'm talking about. So there's two people sitting down at a campfire. One person looks more modern and one person looks more native. The modern gentleman says, "What's the problem with the world?" And the Native American gentleman says, "You have severed your connection with spirit." The reason I wanted to share this is because I don't agree with this post. Let's just say, taking into account modern day science, that the minds had been conditioned to think a very particular way. Then that means that as a human collective, we've been keeping alive these structures that are not truly for our highest good. We've been keeping them alive because we've been conditioned to do so, right? Such as the money structure, the school structures, the way that we work, our health, our survival techniques. We've been doing things in a very particular fashion, not because it's the best, but because that's how we've been conditioned to do them. Over the last few years, and I'm saying that lightly because this process is very big, but we're just going to keep things simple. Over the last few years, a lot of people have kind of come to terms with the fact that the minds have been conditioned and we've been participating in a game of sorts. And now that game has come to its conclusion. So most of us are scurrying around, facing all of these fears, facing all of this conditioning, trying to figure out what that even means. My mind has been conditioned. Well, shit, what does that even mean? And where do I go from here? Right? So that's what most of us have been in over these last few years, this space of learning how to feel safe in an unsafe space, taking back our power, taking back our thoughts, learning a different truth about how we work, about how the world works, feeling comfortable with adopting a different truth. When you've been conditioned to think you're alone in the universe your whole entire life, when you've been conditioned to think there is no rhyme or reason and you're very small, you become comfortable there because you know where you're at. You know your space. You're in your box, but you know your box. So for most of us, our boxes have been falling apart, and we're having to become comfortable with stepping outside of that. The reason all the chaos is unfolding in the world the way that it is because it is a part of the process of reconnecting with a higher truth that's available. The reason I wanted to use this post is because this gentleman says, "What's the problem with the world?" And the answer is, you have severed your connection with spirit. When in fact, the way that I see things is it's the complete opposite. for the first time in a very long time, the human collective is taking back their power. Now, what does that process look like? You're seeing it. You're seeing it. All the crazy things that are happening in the world, the earth, she's purging. She's cleaning everything out that she's been carrying that is lower vibrations. The same is happening within all of us. As it happens within us, it happens outside of us. Now, I'm not saying the things that are happening in the world aren't terrible. Of course, there's a lot of things that are happening that are like, whoa, that is wild. But I'll tell you what, I've been channeling now actively for about 6 years. And there are a lot of souls that are contracted to leave at this time. And the best of them have chosen to leave through a catastrophic event in order to assist the rest of the collective to open their eyes. Open your eyes. You are powerful beyond measure, beyond anything that you've ever been told. We are not alone in the universe. We have never been alone in the universe. The game that we have been taught is not the game that's being played. Things are changing. And there is a new truth becoming available. What that truth is going to look like is going to be different for everybody. I have my perspective of what channeling is. I have my perspective of the higher self. I have my perspective of being multidimensional. These are all things that it took me a good 4 or 5 years of observation before I truly adopted all of these beliefs. It was just one test after the other after the other. But when you hit that rock bottom, which we all have, right? It's in that space that you say, you know what? I don't have anything left to lose. So what's a higher self? And that will be the changing point of your life, is the day that you say, what else is there to believe? Because what I'm believing is not supporting me. That's going to be the turning point. And that's happening within a lot of us. The reason we are seeing so much chaos happen in the world is because we're taking back our power. And the naughties, as I like to call them, that threatens their environment. Right? When the individual becomes more powerful, then that threatens anybody who is in power over the collective. Right? And that's not rocket science. We get that. That makes sense. So there's a lot in that we could dive into, this and that. And, I don't really want to go into any of that. I don't find a need to go into the alternative agenda. We can talk about that in another podcast where I will be more than happy to share my perspective, because to me it fits like a puzzle piece. But you're gonna have to go far in order to understand this perspective. It's pretty deep what's happening in the world. It's so wild to think. Like, now I look back and I'm like, Jesus, my whole life I truly believed that there was no rhyme or reason, and the universe just hated me. That's why I had the circumstances I had, and that was that. I'm just put down here. Hopefully I do okay. Otherwise I'm going to hell, but this is basically hell anyway. So, right? That was literally the mindset that I lived in for majority of my life until I hit the rock bottom. What happens during the rock bottom? You fucking crack. You break everything that you've created, that you've been trying so hard to hold together, that's not truly for you. The only reason you're holding it together is out of fear. Breaks. And then what happens? There's nothing left to fear. because now it's broken. I was broken. We've all been broken. How long do we have to sit in that space before we realize what's actually occurring here? This is not happening in the world because we've severed our connection with spirit. It's happening in the world because we are regaining our connection with spirit. We are regaining our connection within ourselves. We are remembering who we are. We are reclaiming our identity within the universe. That's why this is happening. Because the dark has to come up and out. But we're all in a space now to face it, to look at it, to see the truth, to make the changes within ourselves and within our communities that we need in order to move forward in a healthier fashion. What we're doing doesn't work. The financial structure sucks. It keeps poor people poor. It keeps rich people rich. It just sucks. Learn manifestation. Learn manifestation. This is about your thoughts and your feelings and allowing yourself to be there in your thoughts and your feelings. You know why it's been so difficult to be in your thoughts and your feelings? Because you're conditioned to not be there. How many times have we all heard, get out of your imagination? It's not going to get you anywhere. Well, that's a crock of shit. My whole life, society told me that. Get out of your imagination. Come on, come back to real life. Snap, 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 right? Bring it back. Come here. Get to work. Now, as an adult, I spend an hour a day in visualization because that's how I make things work in the physical. I see it, I feel it, I consciously attune my energy to what I want, and then I go about my day. It's changed my life. I'm successful and happy, and one of the biggest parts of that equation is allowing myself to learn how to feel, to see, and to feel safe in feeling and seeing. Isn't that crazy? Most people don't feel comfortable there. Why? Because you're conditioned not to feel comfortable there. Because if you did feel comfortable there, I've spent 6 years. You could tell this last 6 years has been a wild ride for me, but as a teacher, as a leader, as somebody that wants to share this information with other people, I have to first learn it in my own life. I understand now that people don't want to be told what to do. They want to see it. They want to see it. Once I started just doing it in my own life, people hear me. Why? Because I hear myself. Because I'm doing it in my own life. I hear myself. So people hear me. They naturally come to me. I didn't have to strive to put together the podcast episode. It was 4 or 5 people in a day that I had worked with that they said, you really need to start a podcast. And I was like, okay, well, that's all right. Let's do that. So here we are. I've spent the last few years scientifically deconditioning my relationship with my feelings and my emotions and reconditioning them to think better thoughts, to feel better feelings. And this has had a major impact on my external reality. I'm going to give you an example. The mind is filled with different emotions, okay? You have a relationship with each emotion. Now, the relationship that you have with each emotion is going to play a major role in your life because every day you walk through life and you have to talk and feel these emotions. And a lot of times things outside of us occur that draw on these emotions, right? So they'll trigger something up, and now you're sitting with sadness, or now you're sitting with happiness, or now you're sitting with anxiety, or now you're sitting with freedom. All these different emotions that we deal with every day. The relationship you have with these emotions is going to dictate your thought and your feeling of everything you experience. anything that comes into your reality at all. You could just be walking down the road. You're thinking and feeling. There's no shutting it off. It's just how you work, baby. You're thinking and you're feeling. So you have to have conditioned relationships that serve you. The issue that we're dealing with as a collective is that we do have conditioned relationships with our emotions, but they're not conditioned properly. They're conditioned to work against us. And we'll get into why on another podcast. But we are conditioned from a very early age to have terrible relationships with all of our emotions. So as we walk through life, we feel very victim to a lot of the things that happen. And this is a result of our conditioning. It's not because you're flawed. It's not because you're broken. It's because our minds are conditioned. I want to take a moment to focus on a really good one, which is forgiveness. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. When I first started the healing process, I eventually hit the chapter of forgiveness. Simultaneous, I was picking apart the construct and the belief structure that my mind had created when I was young through observation and through experience, right? Everything that you see and you observe, you're absorbing that, creating beliefs based on that. By the time you're 7, you've created a construct within your mind, a belief structure about how this world works, about how you work, right? And then as you move into adulthood, you create a lifestyle based on these core beliefs. I understood that. Once I came to that awareness, I thought, okay, well, I don't like the external reality I'm experiencing. If my external reality is a result of conditioned beliefs, then the question becomes, can I scientifically get into my subconscious mind, break that construct apart, take out the beliefs that do not serve me, replace them with new beliefs that do serve me, and, as a result, upgrade the external reality. That became my mission. Not to show other people, but to accomplish in my own life and then demonstrate to other people. When I came to the section of forgiveness, I was not only focusing on building a new relationship with my emotions, but I was also actively deconstructing my mind. Okay, so as I came to the chapter of forgiveness, I realized there that my relationship with forgiveness was absolutely conditioned. Here's a great example. Here's what I mean by this. I wanted to do some work where I could go back into the past and forgive somebody in the past. And I was having some trouble doing that. And so I thought, you know what, let me dive into what my relationship with forgiveness is. I don't even know what forgiveness is. And this is where science really comes in, because now you're talking about the conditioned relationship that you have with your emotions. It really doesn't have anything to do with spirituality. It has everything to do with science. What did you believe when you were that age? Because that's what you believe today. So I dove into forgiveness, and what I realized was that I was taught through society that forgiveness meant that I was condoning somebody's actions. That was my relationship with forgiveness. I was conditioned to believe that if I forgave somebody, it meant I was saying, it's okay. It's okay. I get it. I understand. And I'm okay with your actions. How on God's green earth could you ever forgive somebody if that's what forgiveness means to you? The truth is, I'm not okay with your actions. I'll never be okay with your actions. How can I forgive you if I'm not okay with your actions? If my belief means that forgiveness means I'm excusing somebody's actions. You can see the tug of war. And that was occurring within my mind. I was having trouble forgiving this person, these people, these things, these circumstances, the universe, myself. Because the truth was, I was conditioned to have a shitty relationship with forgiveness. Once I realized that, it was like, whoa, whole nother ball game. Before I can even get into forgiving any of these people, places, things, or circumstances, including myself, I have to reconstruct my relationship with these emotions. Once I started diving into forgiveness, I started playing around with it a little bit. What I discovered is an entirely different relationship that was available for me if I wanted to actually sit down and get to know forgiveness outside of what I had been taught about it. My forgiveness now does not mean that I am okay with what happened. It does not mean that I condone anybody's actions. I will observe a situation and move accordingly. But I can forgive you because I don't want to carry that hatred. I don't want to carry that anger. So forgiveness for me means I'm putting down the bag. It doesn't mean I'm saying I'm okay with what happened. It doesn't mean I'm going to stick around. It doesn't mean we're going to continue on into the next chapter. Depending on the situation, of course. If this is somebody that you're really tied to or a situation that you're really tied to, then you set your boundary, you have that conversation, you move accordingly. And hopefully you can help that person grow and that person can help you grow and you can continue on your growth cycle. But for some people that really cross certain boundaries, they are there to help you say, no, I'm not okay with that. But just because you say no doesn't mean you have to be angry about it. You don't have to be malicious. You don't have to be angry. There are plenty of people now that I've been able to reconstruct my relationship with forgiveness. I've been able to look back on situations and be like, hey, I had to observe it and I had to move accordingly, but I forgive you. I get it. The mind's conditioned. Earth is not an easy school. I get it. You couldn't love me because you were not conditioned to understand what love was. I forgive you. I get it. You couldn't be there for me the ways I needed you to because you didn't have somebody there for you. And that's what you absorbed and observed during childhood. You created a belief that this is how you're there for people by not being there. I get it. I'm not okay with it. I got to observe it and move accordingly, but I forgive you. And this is just one emotion that I'm talking about. The list goes on and on. So you have your main emotions, all of them, including happiness. Most of us, we have a terrible relationship with happiness, not because happiness is a terrible emotion, but because we don't even know happiness. We haven't given ourselves time to know happiness because we were conditioned from a very early age that happiness sits over there in the corner, does its thing, it's better that way. Trust me. That's the conditioning. So the process that we're all undergoing right now is allowing ourselves to feel again, allowing ourselves to build new relationships with each of our emotions, because your thoughts and your feelings, which are your emotions, that's your point of manifestation. Most people don't want to sit down and visualize because that's not a safe space for them. You've been taught your whole life you're not valuable. Why would you want to take a half hour a day to spend directly with yourself after your whole life you've been taught you're worth nothing? There you go. There's the tug of war. The beautiful thing about this is that modern day science is really coming up strong for all of us to look at. Once you understand that the mind's been conditioned, you can begin to put together the puzzle pieces. Like, the reason things aren't working out is not because you're flawed. It's not because you're broken. It's not because you're less than. It's not because you're a victim of the universe. It's because you lack awareness about how we truly work as a result of being conditioned from the second we come into this world. For the first time ever, we can forgive ourselves. and we can begin holding the space for others because we understand how it works now. It's wild. It's a wild time to be alive, guys. It's crazy, mind-blowing. But I can promise you, and maybe it's a matter of perspective, so I shouldn't say I can promise you, but I can promise you, if you choose to dive into this kind of work, deconstruct your mind a little bit, take back your thoughts, take back your power, take back your feelings, create a new construct, create a new belief structure within your mind. If you decide to embark on this journey, then I can promise you that the reason everything's happening in the world the way it is not because you've severed your connection. It's because you're regaining it. You're remembering who you are and what you're capable of. And as it happens within each one of us, we become more powerful, we become brighter, we become stronger. Everything that's happening in the world is because the light is beginning to shine so bright. There are no more dark crevices. There are no more lies. They can't exist in this environment. They can't exist in this vibration. All right, so that's just what I wanted to touch on today's podcast. Because once I had seen that post, I just thought, that's part of the problem, is that we are conditioned to see the negative in everything. And so if you're looking at the world and you're focused on the negative, you're helping the negativity, you're feeding it, you're energizing it. And I know it's easier said than done. There are some people that you're right in the middle of some terrible situations, and my heart goes out. There's many times where I'll close my eyes and I'll visualize the earth, and I'll just see a white light around it, just for a moment. And then send that energy out to the world and get on with my day. Stay as present and as in the moment as possible. But there are a lot of us that we're okay right this second. We're okay right this second. Our jobs are to call in the higher self, begin working with that part of ourselves, begin reconnecting our emotions, and start doing the inner work that we have to do. As we do this on an individual scale, that reflects on a collective scale. So, I hope that this gave some clarity as to what's happening and some encouragement as to what's happening. That's what I'm doing right now, day by day, in the moment, one foot in front of the other. I'm still deconditioning, and I've been doing this for a couple years now. But I have some beautiful mentors and beautiful team that I'm working with, and beautiful people like you showing up to support me. If you haven't already hit that like and subscribe button, please do. Know that as you love and support me, I love and support you as well. You can also hop on my website at www.innersarah.com and subscribe that way so that you get notified when my book Unlocked comes out. We got a lot going on here, guys. So I hope that this brought some clarity, gave you something to think about as we're moving through our day-to-day process of life, right? There's so many things that we're kind of being bombarded by, and to have this bigger awareness is really important at this time. So my intention is to leave you thinking and pondering. And as always, because of the law of free will, call on your higher self. Your higher self loves you. Your higher self is there for you, all right? I know that might feel uncomfortable sometimes. Might be like, what's the higher self? That takes us into tomorrow's podcast episode. If you haven't checked out A Phone Call with Freedom, every Wednesday we do an episode there where we also talk about the findings of the universe. And so tomorrow we're going to be talking about a higher self, what a higher self is, how a higher self works, my experience with the higher self so far. And there's so much to unpack there. And honestly, it's just amazing. Like I would never go back. I got to tell you, it's a rabbit hole I would jump down over and over and over again. My higher self is my right hand. It's my best friend. It's just reconnecting with that part of yourself that we've been disconnected from for a very long time. But my higher self, your higher self, I gotta tell you, is funny. If you like humor, oh gosh. Once you reconnect with your higher self, you're like, holy shit, this is real. This is real. We're multidimensional, and I have a version of myself on the other side of the veil. Wow, like that's crazy. It's still mind-blowing to me, but at the same time, life used to be so boring. And I'm like, this is so much better. So make sure you hop back on tomorrow for a phone call with Freedom, where we're going to talk about the higher self, what that looks like, and how you can connect with your higher self and all the fun aspects that come along with it. It's a crazy time to be alive, but I am thrilled to be here, and I am extra happy to be here with you. So namaste, and I will see you tomorrow when you hop on for a phone call with Freedom, and then again Monday for a read with SJ, and then Tuesday for another episode of the Process podcast.